Yasya yato niviyat itaratas chartesu avigyaswara.
Janma Dhyasayata Vayaritartas Chatirsvavigaswara.
Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye Muyanti Yatsurayaha.
Tenne Brahma Rudaya Adhikavaye Mojanti Jasuraya.
Tejo Varimadam Yata Vinimayo Yatra Trisargomesha.
Tejo Varimrida Jata Vinimayo Jatra Trisargomrisa.
Dhamna Svena Siddhari Rasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
Dhamna Svenna Sada Nirasta Kuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O my Lord Shri Krishna, son of Vasudeva.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisances unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Shri Krishna because the absolute truth
And the primeval cause of all causes.
and the primeval cause of all causes
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
of the creation, sustenance, destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there's no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond
It
him.
is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is the only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahma.
the original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion.
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
As one is bewildered by the illusory representations
of water seen in fire or land seen on water.
water seen to fire, land seen to water.
Only because of him do the material universes appear.
Only because of him do the material universes
Temporarily manifested by the reactions of the modes of material nature.
temporarily manifested by the reaction of the modes of nature.
Appear factual, although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri Krishna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who
Krishna,
is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternal existence in the transcendental
which is
abode,
forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the material
I
world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
Dharma projita kaitravatra
Dharma Prajita Kaitaputra,
paramo nimatsaranam satam
Brahmo Nirmasharanam Satam,
vedyam vastavam atra vastu
Vedyam Vastavam Astra Vastu,
shivadam tapa trayon mulanam
Shivadam Taputrayamuranam,
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani Krite
Srimad Bhagavate Mahamani
Kim va purer ishvaraha
Kimba Paderishvara,
sadyo hridi avarudyate tra
Sadyo Rudya Varidya Titra,
kriti bihi sususabhistakshanam,
Kritibihi Shushu Shubhistat Kyanat,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material motivated.
This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in
The
heart.
highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth is their reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such truth uproot the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity,
It is beautiful Bhagavatam compiled with the great sage Vyasadeva's maturity.
is sufficient in itself for God realization.
It is sufficient itself for God's realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
by this culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kapataror galitam phalam
Nigama Kaltan Palam,
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam
Sukam Kad Mritadrava Sangitam,
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam
Pipata Bhagavatam Rasa Malayam,
mahur ahor rasika bhuvibhagaha.
Mura Hurisika Bhuvivavuka.
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Maharaj.
the mature fruit of the desired true Vedic
The
literatures.
mature fruit, the desired fruit, the Vedic glory.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami.
It emanated from the lips of Shishuguru Goswami.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Krishna,
Srimvatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Hridyantak Stohi Abhadrani,
Sohya Bhadrani,
Vidunoti Srihitsatam.
Guru Nati
To hear
Surisatam.
about Krishna from Vedic literatures,
To hear about Krishna from the very
or to
Lord,
hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
but to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita.
is itself righteous activity.
It is self-righteous
And
activity.
for one who hears about Krishna,
One who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart,
well, Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's
acts
heart,
as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishing
and
friend,
purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of
and
him.
purifies the devotees constantly engaged with hearing with him.
Nasta prayesu bhadresu
Nasta prayeshva bhadrishu
nityam bhagavata sevaya
nityam bhagavata sevaya
bhagavati utamasloke
bhagavati uttama sloke
bhaktir bhavati naistaki.
bhakti bhavatir naistikhi.
In this way, the devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
This way devotees naturally develop his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
But he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees.
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
He becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
kamalobhadayaschaye
cheta etairanavidam
chetaiteranavidam
stitvam sattve prasidati.
sitam sadve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional
one
service,
becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes free from the mode of passion of ignorance,
and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished.
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasanamanasu
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogataha
Bhagavat Bhakti Yogata
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
When these impurities are wiped
the
away,
candidate remains steady in his position of pure
the
goodness,
candidate remains steady in the position of pure goodness,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
Vidyate Hridaya Granthis
Siddhyante Sarva Samsaya
Chidyante Sarva Samshaya
Siyante Chasya Karmani
Chidyante Sachakarmani
Drishta Evatmanishvare.
Drista Evatmaneshvare.
Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the heart not of material affection,
Thus the Bhakti Yoga serves the heart of the material
and
affection
enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enables us to come at once to the stage of Samshaya
understanding of the supreme absolute truth personality of God.
understanding the supreme absolute truth of your Godhead.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna, only by hearing from Krishna or from Krishna's devotee in devotional service,
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from
From
his
his
devotees
devotees
in Krishna consciousness
can one understand the science of God.
can one understand the science of God, Krishna.
Okay, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 30. Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsam
Sabhuta sukshmendriya sanikarsham
mano mayam deva mayam vikaryam
manomayam devamayam vikaryam
samsadya gatya sahatena yati
samsadya gatya sahatena yati
vijnana tattvam gunasanirodham.
vijnana tattvam gunasa nirodham.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The devotee, thus surpassing the gross and the subtle forms of coverings, enters the plane of egoism, and in that status he merges the material modes of nature, ignorance and passion, in this point of neutralization, and thus reaches egoism and goodness. After this, all egoism is merged in the Mahatattva, and he comes to the point of pure self-realization. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Pure self-realization, as we have several times discussed, is the pure consciousness of admitting oneself to be the eternal servitor of the Lord. Thus, one is reinstated in his original position of transcendental loving service to the Lord, as will be clearly explained in the following verse. This stage of rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord without any hopes of emolument from the Lord. Now, this word emolument is an important word, and the meaning of the word is receiving benefits. It's usually used like in the Constitution of the United States, where there's a law that any politician in the United States government who receives gifts from a foreign country, they'll be prosecuted. Because then they come under the influence of a foreign country. So an emolument is some kind of a reward or money or assets or privileges given to someone, but especially in a politician. And it undermines their ability to protect the interests of the country that they're politician of. They come under influence of a foreign, foreign country, and who knows what that foreign country's agenda is. So it has a specific meaning and has a more general meaning of bribing somebody by giving them something. So this stage of rendering transcendental service to the Lord without any hopes of emolument from the Lord, so a hope of emolument is a hope of something getting in return for their service, right, in this context, or any other way, can be attained when the material senses are purified and the original pure state of the senses is revived. What's the pure state of the senses? They belong to Krishna. Hrishikena, Hrishikesha, Sevanam Bhakti Uttama. So they have to be used in the service of the Lord. It is suggested herein that the process of purifying the senses by the yogic way, namely the gross senses, are merged in the mode of ignorance, and the subtle senses are merged in the mode of passion. The mind belongs to the mode of goodness, and therefore is called Deva Maya, or godly. So when Maya has two long A's, then it means illusory energy. But here you see Deva Maya doesn't have two long A's. So that means it belongs to godly nature. Right? Perfect purification of the mind is made possible when one is fixed in the conviction of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. So, this is an important point. This is what should be taught to our children. The mind should not be used for sense gratification, or meditating on sense gratification, or how to get sense gratification, or how to protect and perpetuate sense gratification. It should be focused on, or it should be fixed in the conviction of being the eternal servitor of the Lord. That's what should be taught to our children. And conviction means something they're absolutely sure of, and they're not going to let go of it. Therefore, simple attainment of goodness is also a material mode. One has to surpass this stage of material goodness and reach the point of purified goodness, or Vasudeva Sattva. It's also called Visuddha Sattva or Suddha Sattva. This Vasudeva Sattva, Vasudeva Sattva, not Vasudeva, but Vasudeva Sattva, helps one to enter into the kingdom of God. We may also, that word Vasudeva has different meanings. We usually say, when the A is long, when the first A is long, it means Krishna. But when it's short, it can mean several different things. It can mean the father of Krishna, or it can mean some other things, like in this Vasudeva Sattva. So basically it's called divine goodness, or transcendental. It also means transcendental goodness. We may also remember in this connection that the process of gradual emancipation by the devotees in the manner mentioned above, although authoritative, so he's talking about the meditative yoga right? Or the mechanical yoga system, right, is not viable in the present age. That means viable means it's not, you can't practice it and attain success. It's not something that's possible in the present age because of people being primarily unaware of yoga practice. In other words, we've studied this before, the definition of yoga has nothing to do with in the dictionary, has nothing to do with the real meaning of yoga. So people don't understand what yoga is in this age because they've been given a false definition of it. The so-called yoga practice by the professional protagonists. So this is the teachers. They're the ones teaching it or professing it, as if they're some experts. May be physiologically beneficial. That means may be beneficial to the body. You might feel better. You might be healthier by doing it. But such small success cannot help one in the attainment of spiritual emancipation as mentioned herein. 5,000 years ago, when the social status of human society was in perfect Vedic order, the yoga process mentioned herein was a common affair for everyone because everyone, and especially the Brahmana and Kshatriya, was trained in the transcendental art under the care of the spiritual master. Far away from home in the status of brahmacharya. So, children were sent away from the home at 5 years old to the home of the spiritual master, who were usually householders, but not all the time. And they were trained in Krishna consciousness, especially to sacrifice, and to sacrifice everything for the Guru. And once they were trained, then they had a choice whether to get married or to remain celibate the rest of their life. Modern man, however, is incompetent to understand it perfectly. Lord Sri Chaitanya, in other words, understand what? Understand the mechanical process and go through it as they did previously. Lord Sri Chaitanya therefore made it easier, see, that's a very important point, for the prospective devotee of the present age in the following specific manner. Ultimately, there's no difference in the result. No, there's no difference in the result aimed for in the mechanical system or the bhakti system. The first and foremost point is that one must understand the prime importance of bhakti yoga. So even in the meditative state or the mechanical state, they still have to come to the point of bhakti. Without bhakti, they'll never achieve perfection, even though they're perfect yogis. And one example would be Durvasa Muni. I mean, he was a perfect yogi. He could even go to Vaikuntha and see Lord Vishnu. But still, he was envious of Harivilas Maharaj. So that's not bhakti. There's no question of enviousness in bhakti yoga. The living beings in different species of life are undergoing different terms of engagement according to their fruitive actions and reactions. But in the execution of different activities, one who secures some resources in bhakti yoga can understand the importance of service to the Lord through the causeless mercy of the Lord as well as that of the spiritual master. So we see bhakti is totally dependent on Krishna, and Krishna's pure representative, the bona fide spiritual master. A sincere soul is helped by the Lord through meeting a bona fide spiritual master, the representative of the Lord. By the instruction of such a spiritual master, one gets the seed of bhakti yoga. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends that the devotee sow the seed of bhakti yoga in his heart and nurture it by the watering of hearing and chanting the holy name, fame, etc. of the Lord. So here we have a garden, let's say, metaphor or example. It's a garden example, just like you get a seed and then you plant it, and then you care for it, and it sprouts, and then you care more for it, and you protect it, and it grows, and eventually it gives fruits or vegetables. First there are flowers, and then fruits, and vegetables, and then there are more seeds. And those fruits and vegetables are offered to the Supreme Lord. And then he offers it back as his prasadam. The simple process of offenselessly chanting and hearing the holy name of the Lord will gradually promote one very soon to the stage of emancipation. Emancipation means liberation. So it's not that in the liberation you sprout some wings and you fly up to the sky, to the spiritual world, and you pass through all the other planets in the material universe, and as it was described previously, and eventually you enter into the spiritual universe. No, you're liberated here in the material world, even though you still have a material body, because you're only using the body, the mind, intelligence, the senses in the service of Krishna. There are 3 stages in chanting the holy name of the Lord. So this is important to know. The first stage is offensive chanting of the holy name. And the second is the reflective stage of chanting the holy name. The third is the offenseless chanting of the holy name of the Lord. And the second stage only, the stage of reflection between the offensive and offenseless stages, one automatically attains the stage of emancipation. So this was explained by Haridas Thakur in an assembly of people. And one Brahmana rejected, or objected. And he said, this is nonsense what you said. I reject this. You don't know what you're talking about. So it was very insulting. And Haridas Thakur tried to convince him, but because that Brahmana was envious of Haridas Thakur. Remember, he's born in a Muslim family, and now he's the Nama Acharya. So this was a jealous and envious Brahmana. So what happened to that Brahmana? He got leprosy very quickly. He was suffering terribly. And one day, Lord Chaitanya came near him, and he begged the Lord to help him. And the Lord refused, right? Because he was, he had insulted Haridas Thakur as a pure devotee. So blaspheming a pure devotee is a very, very serious offense, most serious offense, and one should never do it. One has to go back to the person they offended in order to get release from the suffering. Krishna does not in any way tolerate an offense to his pure devotee. Pure devotee might excuse the person, but Krishna doesn't excuse them. And in the offenseless stage, one actually enters into the kingdom of God, although physically he may apparently be within the material world. To attain the offenseless stage, one must be on guard in the following manner. Okay, so now we're going to hear some very important instructions. When we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only should one chant and hear of the holy name of the Lord as Rama, Krishna, or systematically the 16 names Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam in the association of devotees. There it is. The primary practice of Bhakti Yoga will cause the seed already sown in the heart to sprout. And the regular watering process, as mentioned above, the Bhakti Yoga creeper will begin to grow. By systematic nurturing, the creeper will grow to such an extent that it will penetrate the coverings and material of the universe, as we have heard in the previous verses, reach the effulgent sky, the Brahmajyoti, and go farther and farther and reach the spiritual sky, where there are innumerable spiritual planets called Vaikuntha Lokas. Above all of them is Krishna Loka, or Goloka Vrindavan, wherein the growing creeper enters and takes repose at the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, the original personality of Godhead. When one reaches the lotus feet of Lord Krishna at Goloka Vrindavana, the watering process of hearing and reading, as also chanting of the holy name in the pure devotional stage, fructifies, and the fruits grown there in the form of love of God are tangibly tasted by the devotee, even though he is here in the material world. The ripe fruits of love of God are relished only by devotees, constantly engaged in the watering process as described above. So this is basically the same description that's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that was explained by Lord Chaitanya to, I'm not sure whether it's Rupa Goswami or Sanatana Goswami, but it's basically word for word the same description that well, Krishnadas Kaviraj wrote the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yeah, we say Mahaprabhu would explain it to Rupa Goswami, teaching Rupa Goswami.
Okay. But the working devotee must always be mindful so that the creeper, which has so grown, will not be cut off. Therefore, he should be mindful of the following considerations. So now there's more specific information about how to attain and stay in pure Krishna consciousness. Offense by one at the feet of a pure devotee may be likened to the mad elephant who devastates a very good garden if it enters. So there you are. That's the most terrible offense, offending a pure devotee. 2, one must be very careful to guard himself against such offenses at the feet of pure devotees, just as one protects a creeper by all-around fencing. Well, that's what we're doing at the farm. It so happens that by the watering process, some weeds are also grown, and unless such weeds are uprooted, the nurturing of the main creeper or the creeper of Bhakti Yoga may be hampered. Well, that's what we do also at the farm. We weed regularly, even after the plant. We weed before we plant, and we weed after we plant. Actually, these weeds are material enjoyment, merging of the self in the absolute without separate individuality. In other words, being karmi or being a mayavadi, and many other desires in the field of religion, economic development, sense enjoyment, and emancipation. 5, there are many other weeds like disobedience to the tenets of the revealed scriptures, unnecessary engagements, killing animals, and hankering after material gain, prestige, and adoration. If sufficient care is not taken, then the watering process may only help breed the weeds, stunting the healthy growth of the main creeper and resulting in no fructification of the ultimate requirement, love of God. Yeah, if you don't weed after you plant, then the weeds will basically take over and dwarf the plants and take most of the nutrition out of the earth and deprive the plants of the nutrition, so that the plants may grow a lot of leaves but not give any vegetables or fruits, or the quality of the vegetables and fruits will be mediocre. The devotee must be therefore very careful to uproot the different weeds in the very beginning. Only then will the healthy growth of the main creeper not be stunted. And by so doing, the devotee is able to relish the fruit of love of God and thus live practically with Lord Krishna, even in this life, and be able to see the Lord in every step. So that's what happens when we follow the rules and regulations. And how do you follow? You chant Hare Krishna and you attend classes and you engage actively in devotional service, and gradually you get rid of all unnecessary things that are not related to devotional service. The highest perfection of life is to enjoy life constantly in the association of the Lord, and one who can relish this does not aspire after any temporary enjoyment of the material world via other media. So here we have a very powerful difference between Mayavad philosophy and Krishna consciousness. If you say to Mayavadis, you have to enjoy life in association of the Lord, they would say, no, that's Maya. We have to reject everything in the material world. But the devotee is not here to reject everything. Anything in relationship to Krishna cannot be rejected by the devotee. So the devotee can enjoy life constantly in the association of the Lord. There's also a similar type of explanation in the Bhagavad Gita given by Prabhupada. Let's see if I can find it real quickly. It might be in the 7th chapter. Let's take a look. See, the Mayavadi doesn't enjoy life. They're renouncing all the time, everything, including Krishna. But the devotee, once they give up sense gratification and completely engage in Krishna's service, they enjoy life in union, or in union always with Krishna. Okay, let's look at the 9th chapter, 26th verse. Let's see what it says. Okay, I'm going to have to find this later on. There's a verse where, there's a purport probably, it says that, especially concerning relishing or respecting prasadam, he says the Mayavadi does not do such a thing, but the devotee enjoys life by taking prasadam and chanting and dancing in respect with the Lord. Okay, I'll find it later. Okay, so that's the entire purport. Now, this is an extremely important purport. That's why we took different stops to explain the different words and the concepts. But here we have a real explanation of Krishna consciousness. And you see the way Prabhupada writes. He's explaining Bhagavatam as it is. He's not leaving out any parts of the Bhagavatam. But he's showing how the mechanical process of going back to Godhead is not viable. It's not possible to successfully perform in this age, although it's bona fide. In previous ages, kids were trained from the beginning of their life to be able to go through that process. But are kids trained in that way today? No. So everyone's trained in sense gratification today, not in using the senses to please Krishna. So therefore, this process that Lord Chaitanya gave is easy to follow if one follows correctly. If they hold on to sense gratification and at the same time try to advance in Krishna consciousness, it doesn't work. And that's the main point. But if they actually engage in pure Krishna consciousness, not only do they attain blissful life or live a blissful life, but they also make steady devotional advancement and go back to Godhead. In fact, they're back to Godhead already because their mind is completely absorbed in Krishna. And as that verse said that we read yesterday, 12th chapter, it says that, I think it's the 5th and 6th verse, let's see, yes. Yetu sarvani bhutani karmani maya sanyasa matpara ananyanaiva yogena mam dhyayantu upasate te samaham samudarta mrityu samsara sagarat maya bhavani nachirat parta maya vesita chetasam. So, but those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me, that means all their activities, and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Prita. For them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So this is a really important verse, 12th chapter, 6th and 7th verse. And for one who does this, they quickly go back to Godhead. They don't have to meditate and do all these things that have been described in the mechanical system. And this is again reaffirmed in the 12th chapter, 2nd verse, where it says, Maya Vesha Mano Ye Mam Nitya Yukto Pasate Shradaya Parayo Petas Te Me Yukta Toma Mata. The Supreme Personality of God has said, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshiping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be the most perfect. So, Prabhupada writes, in answer to Arjuna's question, Krishna clearly says that he who concentrates upon his personal form and who worships him with faith and devotion is to be considered most perfect in yoga. For one, in such Krishna consciousness, there are no material activities because everything is done for Krishna. A pure devotee is constantly engaged. Sometimes he chants, sometimes he hears or reads books about Krishna, or sometimes he cooks prasadam or goes to the marketplace to purchase something for Krishna, or sometimes he washes the temple or the dishes. Whatever he does not let a single moment pass without devoting his activities to Krishna. Such action is full samadhi. There you are. Beautiful verse and purport. Okay, so everything is focused on hearing and chanting. And yesterday we discussed something, but I want to discuss it much more in depth. And that is the sense of relativity. This again is another major point of difference in education, of traditional education and education today. So, this begins right in the first canto, first chapter, first verse. In the fifth paragraph of that purport, Prabhupada writes, Srimad Bhagvatam is the narration of the Swarupa of the Lord. Now, Swarupa not only means the form of the Lord, but also the transcendental position of the Lord. The Swarupa of the Lord manifested by his internal potency, and this potency is distinguished from the external potency which has manifested the cosmic world which is within our experience. So right away, there's a major difference between us and Krishna. Right now, in our fallen condition, we're in the external energy of the Lord. And it's a covering, a profound covering of our body and intelligence and mind and senses. But wherever Krishna is, he's always situated or manifested by his internal potency. So this is a major difference between our perception of things and Krishna. Srila Vyasadeva makes a clear distinction between the two in this sloka, meaning the internal and external potencies of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva says herein that the manifested internal potency is real, whereas the external manifested energy in the form of material existence is only temporary and illusory, like the mirage in the desert. Do you see the mirage at night? No. You only see it during the day. And it has to be a very hot day. If it's a very cold day, you might not see it. In the desert mirage, there's no actual water. There's only the appearance of water. Real water is somewhere else. The manifested cosmic creation appears as reality. But reality, of which this is but a shadow, is in the spiritual world. Absolute truth is in the spiritual sky, not the material sky. In the material sky, everything is relative truth. See, that's the point. And everything our kids are learning at school today is relative truth. They don't teach absolute truth in schools. They reject the existence of something absolute. That's humanism. See, based on human beings, not based on transcendental beings, based on mundane human beings. That's what humanism is. And it was sort of summarized by Aristotle, who said, man is the measure. So if you take, man, you're dealing with people like Putin or Trump or Biden or people like that. And how can they be the measure? But reality, of which this is but a shadow, is in the spiritual world. Absolute truth is in the spiritual sky, not the material sky. In the material sky, everything is relative truth. Now we're going to understand what relative means. That is to say, one truth depends on something else. That's what relative means. So is Krishna a relative truth? No, he's absolute truth. He doesn't depend on anything else. Everything depends on him. This cosmic creation results from interaction of the three modes of nature, and the temporary manifestations are so created as to present an illusion of reality to the bewildered mind of the conditioned soul, who appears in so many species of life, including the higher demigods, like Brahma, Indra, Chandra, and so on. In actuality, there is no reality in the manifested world. There appears to be reality, however, because of the true reality which exists in the spiritual world, where the personality of Godhead eternally exists with its transcendental paraphernalia. So this is Srimad Bhagvatam, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Verse 1, and in the purport, Paragraph 5, that explains the difference between the internal potency and the external potency, and between absolute and relative truth. But this is further explained in Srimad Bhagvatam, 1st Canto, 2nd Chapter, 11th verse, where it says, learned transcendentalists know the absolute truth, call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagavan. So in the purport, again, Prabhupada writes, and this is a very important purport, he says, the absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotee. In other words, Bhagavan, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramatma is the partial representations of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Thus, intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. Very important point. Just like 4 blind men were walking and they ran into an elephant. So one of them grabbed the leg of an elephant and said, "It's a tree trunk." Another one grabbed the tail and said, "It's a snake." Another one grabbed the proboscis and said, it's like a big hose, right? Actually, it's a big nose, right? And one of them grabbed the ear and said, "I think it's a bird." So all 4 of them had an incomplete understanding of the elephant. So that's why it says that the above 3 features of one absolute truth are different perspective views seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first sloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, in other words, let's say you understand the Supreme Absolute Truth as a person, but you don't accept that this person can expand himself into millions and millions and billions of Paramatmas. And you don't accept that the light of the Brahma Jyoti is emanating from his body. So you would have an imperfect understanding from your perspective. So, as explained in the first sloka of the first chapter of Bhagavatam, the Supreme Truth is self-sufficient, cognizant. So self-sufficient means he is completely independent, doesn't depend on anyone else. Swaraj, right? And he's cognizant. That means that he knows everything, and it's free from illusion of relativity. We are not free from the illusion of relativity. Not only we're taught this in schools, that everything is relative, but it's in the atmosphere that everything is relative. One thing depends on another thing, which depends on another thing, ad infinitum, right? And there's no absolute truth. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known. But in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. Well, this may sound like Mayavad philosophy, but we have to hear the explanation of our acharyas when it says the knower and the known are one and the same thing, meaning they're all spirit soul. One is the Supreme Spirit Soul, and all the others are minute spirit souls, or expansions of the Supreme Spirit Soul. And they're all eternal. And they're all of the same substance, but not in the same degree. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. Because everything is spiritual in the spiritual world. It's not that you have a spiritual soul in the material world which is not spiritual or not eternal, let's say. Well, the material energy is eternal, but all the forms in the material energy are not material. So the body you have, or I have, is not eternal. The energy, earth, water, fire, air, and ether, and the soul, both of those things are eternal. But the form of the body, or the particular type of body, is not eternal. So we're living in a relative, in a world in which everything is relative. What does that mean? Everything is relative in the material world, yes, because it all depends on Krishna, who's the Supreme Absolute. That part of the state of relativity is not explained in modern education. That it's relative to Krishna, who's the Supreme Absolute Truth. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and spiritual energy, superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy, meaning they're both spiritual. There are 3 kinds of energies of the Supreme Energetic. There is no difference between the energy and the energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the Absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. So we think, the human beings think, everything depends on us, right? Because we build bridges, we build roads, we build airplanes, we build subways, we build computers, we build this, we build that. So everything depends on us. But actually, that's not true. Everything depends on Krishna. So we're not an absolute truth. We're also a relative truth, in the sense that we depend on Krishna. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam. The Krishna and all living entities are nitya, they're eternal. But the difference is that Krishna is maintaining all the other living entities. Therefore, they're all dependent on him. Therefore, they are dependent on the supreme absolute truth. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the Absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. So let's read that again and take it apart. Let's see. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned. Yeah, he thinks, I am this body. I am a product of matter. Thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there's this sense of relativity in the material world, where one thing depends on something else. Just like, for example, the seed depends on water to make it sprout, and heat. And water depends on the heat of the sun. So it's evaporated from the ocean where there's salt water, and then by that evaporation it becomes purified, and then it drops because of changing temperatures on the earth and waters the seed, and then the seed grows. But the sun, it depends on something also. It doesn't generate, it looks like it generates its own energy, but actually it's coming from the Brahma Jyoti. So, everything is relative. One thing depends on something else. And when a person identifies with the material nature, he thinks that he depends on the material nature. So he thinks that the sexual act is the cause of the child being born. But that's not actually true. It's when Krishna places the particular soul into the ovum that the child grows. So the sexual act is not the real cause. I mean, you can have children without sex nowadays. They can have a test tube child, right? So the sexual act is not the cause of the child. Okay, so therefore there's a sense of relativity in the material world. In the Absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. So the knower and the known. So there are two knowers in the body, the individual soul and the supersoul. So, but in the spiritual world, the individual soul and the supersoul, and Krishna are one. They're both eternals, right? That was already explained in Bhagavad Gita, where it says, second chapter, verse number 9. Actually, it's verse number 12. Latvevaham jatu nasam nantamam devi janadi baha nachaivina bhavisyama sarvivayam atakvaram. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. And also in the 2nd chapter, 20th verse, Krishna also says, it says, Najayate mriyate va kadache nayam bhutva bhavitavana ajo nitya sasvatam yam puranam nahanyate hanyamane sarire. For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So, those 2 verses. And then the 3rd verse, again, that emphasizes the eternality of the soul, is 15th chapter, 7th verse, which says, Mama evam sajiva loka jiva bhuta sanatana. It says, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. So, therefore, in the spiritual world, there's no difference between the energetic and the energy. They're all spiritual. It's only in the material world that there's a difference between the spirit soul entrapped in the material body, and therefore a person comes under illusion thinking, I am this body. So then it says, as explained in the first sloka of the 1st chapter of Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. Okay. And then it says there's 3 kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. So there's the internal energy, the marginal energy, and the external energy. There's no difference between the energy and the energetic, but there's a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The living being, in contact with the inferior energy, is illusioned, thinking it belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. This would be rejected by modern philosophers and scientists. They'll insist that everything is relative, there's no absolute. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that because that's a very, very important point. And then there's some other points, but we'll cover it tomorrow. Thank you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai.